Hello, family, and welcome to another episode of Role Model Experts Cafe. I am your host, Dr. L, the Parent Whisperer. And today with me, I have an amazing lady. She has been part of our Family Circle network, and her name is Cheryl Ginnings. Did I say that correctly, Cheryl?
You sure did.
Very
Yes.
good. Thank you so much for taking the time. Your topic is something that is very close to my heart because it actually is very similar to my expertise and some of the stuff that I do. But I wanted you to come and talk to our audiences here in Experts Cafe and tell them a little bit more about what you do and how you got involved in it and go from there. So without further ado, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much for asking me to be here. And I just love the network that you've developed with families in mind. Families have more than one thing going on, but one thing we are trying to improve on is keeping the families together as much as possible. And when we have any one of them missing, I think something is missing in our families in a big way. You know, we need to support each other. And if we can't depend on family, it's pretty hard to get somebody else to really be totally supportive of you. Um, I have been a mother of a special needs son now. He will soon be 52. And it has been a real challenging life. But let me just say this, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Our son is awesome. We've gone through a lot of challenges trying to get what he needed. And then when I went back to finish my degree back after he was no longer, I couldn't lift him anymore. Went into communications and the director said, I want you to do one on why communication breaks down in the families who have special needs. So my degree became an honors program working on that. And he had me make a film. I kept
Hmm.
saying, I'm not an RTF major, but he gave me a student to help with that. And when I was through with 28 hours of film,
Wow.
interviewing all these people on, business, medical, education, families, try to incorporate everybody that would have something to do with their lives. Then I went in, I was so happy. And he said, okay, come with me. And he showed me into a room where there was a machine. And he said, now I want this to be 28 and a half minutes. And I'm going to let you do that. So I'd learned how to do that. And then the good thing was that once I had finished it, it was used on television, and then it was used at two universities in their special education department. And the reason I was so happy to do that is because I know there's a lot of misunderstandings about what happens in a family when they have a special needs person they care for. And I can just say that it's difficult. And if you aren't in there, sometimes you may look at that family and think, well, if they just do whatever, you fill in the blank. And most of the time, they probably have tried it. It's not that we are ignorant, don't know how to do things. It's that we don't know how our children will function best with trying to learn the steps that others take for granted. And I remember our second child was a daughter. And when she came along, we thought everything she did was amazing. I mean, it couldn't have been better because we'd watched him go through speech therapy 3 years to learn to drink from a straw. And, everything we did was really slow, but we would clap and celebrate every tiny thing he did. And that helped me with our other children. We had two daughters, and, just watching what they did was so amazing that I think we celebrated much more than we would have had we not had Blake first. But
Cheryl, actually, one
anyway,
of the things you just mentioned, which is actually pretty important, is being able to have that spirit of celebration, regardless of circumstances. And that's something that sometimes, with all the things that are needed to be done, special needs or not, parents are really busy, and it's a thankless job, and you're constantly going after it. And you need to kind of take a moment and celebrate and enjoy
that's right.
your family and your union, basically. So absolutely.
Well, and one of the things that I have found is that the families who have special needs children immediately need to be helped because the family unit breaks down, and I've read statistics of 90% of the time. And I think a lot of that just goes back to the very beginning. If we could, in fact, that's my dream now, is to help hospitals and doctors, educators to understand that the moment they find out that there is a problem, that they connect them with somebody that can support them, help
Right.
them with communicating with each other. We grieve differently and we misread each other. We're not mind readers. And so we think, oh, they're not helping much when they really are. But we are so focused on how overwhelming it can be that we forget to notice in what ways we're all participating in this. So
Right.
that is a huge dream because I don't want families to break apart. We will celebrate our 56th anniversary a week from Sunday. And I
Wow.
know that you can do that. It's just a lot of times people think, oh, it'd be easier if I didn't have him to worry about or her to worry about it. But I can promise you, my role as a mother would have been so hampered had I not had the support of a husband. Did this together.
So you mentioned something that was a beautiful win actually that you just shared. So thank you for doing that. Um, and you said communication is one of the first things that suffers. So can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of the implications or the symptoms of that?
Well, imagine if you're sitting in a hospital and a doctor comes in the room and he says, well, there's no hope for you. There's no hope for your child. Once you put them away, forget you've ever had them. That happened to me more than once.
Wow.
And when it did, I totally fell apart, just frustrated, crying. I'd been overwhelmed. I was looking for answers, and instead they're throwing it out the window.
Right.
I've often wished I could go back and say, here's my son. No, he never walked. But guess what? He learned to paint. He was celebrated in different places as a special artist. That still was not him. He is such a sweet person, and yet he's gone through abuse in group home. And there are things that happen in families that we can't control, but that's the part that becomes overwhelming. And that's where we break down, I think, a lot of times. We don't know how to react. We don't, okay, you come in, you say, well, our first diagnosis was idiopathic retardation. We waited 6 weeks to get that notice in the mail. Guess what? I opened it, I had no clue what they were talking about. We get in the car, we go to a doctor, and he said, oh, that just means they don't know what's wrong. They don't know what you can do about it. So take him home and love him. Well, then all these symptoms kept coming about with not sleeping, crying all the time. His eyes looked funny. He threw up. And every time I went, the doctor would say, no, Miss Jennings, you're just a new mother. You don't understand. And that eventually kept breaking me down until I sat in the corner and said, I don't know what's going on. And, I was so frustrated. And that's what I see in parents today when I read these comments that are in Facebook groups where people are looking for an answer. All they want is somebody to say, have you tried this? Or here's how you can reach this resource. Or
Right.
here's what I did with my child. And maybe it worked, maybe it won't. But not telling you in a way that puts you down where you don't think you're really smart enough to come in out of the rain. It's a tough job, but when you're left with information you don't even know what it is, that's when your communication is starting to go down. And then the two, husband and wife, in there together, don't understand, and they can say, well, I guess I forgot to take all my vitamins. Maybe it's my fault. Absorbing the guilt themselves.
Mhm.
And then the other one can react and say, well, yeah, if you had done blah, 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 maybe this would not have happened.
Right.
And they weren't right. It's just that the communication is lacking in the kind of nurturing and caring that they need at that time. And my dream is that we can teach hospitals and doctors that from the moment they give them a diagnosis, they offer them support with either a social worker or somebody in the hospital trained to come in and say, now, I know you're going to experience some hard times, and here's what we can do for you, and offer support,
Right.
someone that they can talk to.
That's actually very critical because oftentimes when people get desperate, they go searching for everything and they try crazy things, things that actually
Right.
might make things even worse. So it becomes really, really important for them to know, hey, you know what? These are the people that we trust because you already trust us. There's that implied trust when you're referring and recommending somebody else as a result. So for somebody like you who has had the experience, who have been dealing with support networks, who are a support, that in itself is something that builds credibility, allows people to feel calmer. They have enough on their plate dealing with the issue. The last thing they need to know is whether the advice they're getting is something that is good enough or something that is actually improper in their situation. So having that kind of expertise is very, very important. And then you mentioned something else. Oftentimes, when you're put into these situations, the shame and the guilt comes in, right? Sometimes it's geared towards yourself, and sometimes it's geared towards your team members, your spouse, your
Mhm.
family members. And it's important to keep in the back of your mind that you're not alone, that both yourself as the best ally that you've got, as well as your family and your spouse. And those people are the people that you want to work on this problem together. That this is not something that you want to be frustrated at one another, but rather frustrated at the situation and work together to minimize or eliminate that frustration, basically. So those are really, really important. Of course, all of that comes back to communication, like we were talking about, and knowing how to connect, who to connect, and things like that. So, Cheryl, this is a really deep topic, and I'm pretty sure the parents that have children with special needs or are in special circumstances would love to connect with you. But before we get to that part, can you give some of your tips and tricks as far as where to go based on people who are watching? What would be the one thing that would be like the most important thing they could do right after this to start moving in the right direction?
I would suggest, first of all, try to find a support group. It could be online or it could be in your community or in the church, wherever you are comfortable. And we didn't have that when I was young. Nobody
Mhm.
even thought about the parents. They just thought, okay, well, here's a few tips. Keep him home. Don't let him, you know, this is a totally different mentality than we have now.
Right.
Now we have some help on the internet where you can look up the diagnosis and find out what it's going to mean and understand a little bit more about it. But even then, I'd like to say to parents, don't let anyone put you in a box and treat you like you don't know what you're doing. You
Right.
do. You know your child better than anybody. And just because they don't think you do does not mean that you aren't a good mom or a good dad. You
Right.
just need help. You're in a
That's
situation that is different than where you've been before or maybe again.
right. You're actually absolutely right. As humans, we have this habit or this necessity that we have to categorize things and we have to
Right.
put things in boxes that make sense to us. But the world is not black and white. The world doesn't come in
No,
boxes, and we need to always remember that whenever we're encountering these kind of situations. That is wonderful. All right. So, how can people connect with you and seek support from you?
I think the easiest way for somebody to remember where I am, I'm on LinkedIn, but if you know how to spell Jennings, it's not that way. We're the Ginnings, but it's Cheryl uh, dash coaches is the easiest thing they can go to. Cheryl coaches.com. And
Awesome.
there's an offer on there for a free gift. And if you're a parent of a child with special needs, then you want to click that button and get that. If you
Fantastic.
are actually a caregiver of your parents, I have another gift in there for that. I was on the radio 3 years interviewing people, and I just wanted to know what gave them courage to be the caregiver, and then what lessons we need to share with those coming behind us. So that's the focus of that. I also have a book called It Takes Courage to Be a Caregiver,
Right.
and a parent is still a caregiver. So that would be the easiest way. And I post articles a lot on LinkedIn. And so if you want to connect with me, that's the easiest way to find where else I am.
Right.
And I'd love to connect with them any time that feel like they need help, and I'll try to help them find who's the best resource where they can go.
So I know you have a golden heart and you're a very heart-centered individual, and I really thank you for what you do. And you actually just brought up one important point as well. Oftentimes we talk about special needs and we're automatically thinking about the kids, but for many of the parents who are in the same rich years, basically, this special needs could be related to your parents as well.
Absolutely.
So equally important as well. So thank you so much for doing that. And for our audience members, I will have all the LinkedIn and other links that Cheryl has provided in the description box. So take the time to click there and look for all those other ways that you can gain support, you can gain connect. This is a very important thing for our next generation to understand how to connect and how to ask for support, that it's okay to ask for support. So we need to role model that. And if you haven't already done so, click subscribe so you get notification of all the experts and the gifts that they bring to the channel and get connected with them. Now, before we go, Cheryl, any final words for our audience members?
Well, one of the things that I would love to tell you is that the life that you have is going to be hard, but you know what? We've got all the help that we need out there if we just look for that. But one of the things I try to help people understand is don't get hung up on why did this happen to me? Why did God do this? Why? Why won't get you anywhere except more frustrated. You've got to move on and say, okay, this happened. What am I going to do about it? How will I react to this? And you can either become a better person, stronger, able to help others, or you become bitter and nobody wants to hang around with you. So that's a big suggestion. And I've got lots more information that I can give people. I'd love to connect. So
I love that.
If they can, I'd love to reach out.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I totally believe that if you're in that situation, usually if you ask that question, why, reason is probably there was no other person in the universe that could care and love as well as you do in this particular case. So absolutely. And I always say parents are superheroes. It just oftentimes goes unrecognized, but they are the first superheroes for their kids before there is a Superman and a Batman. So,
And we didn't get any handbooks either, just because our child is different in their abilities than the others are.
right, absolutely. All right, guys. See you around. Take care and connect to Cheryl. Cheers.